who I thought you'd be. You're not hard to please, but full of patience. You're not who I thought you were. You're not cold or stern, but full of kindness. You have always, always, always loved me. Even at my weakest, I look back and see you've always, always, always loved me. Even at my weakest, I look back and I see you. I look back and I see you. You're not who I heard you were. You're not keeping score, but full of mercy. You're not all the lies I bought, a disappointed God. No, you were proud of me. You have always, always, always loved me. Even at my weakest, I look back and see you've always, always, always loved me. Even at my weakest, I look back and see you moving towards me. I look back and see you fighting for me. I look back and I see you. I look back and I see you. I look back and see you moving towards me. I look back and see you fighting for me. I look back and I see you. I look back and I see you. Yeah. You have always, always, always loved me. Even at my weakest, I look back and see you've always, always, always loved me. Even at my weakest, I look back and I see you. I look back and I see you. Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will. Summer and winter, and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, scenes all mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand has provided. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Good morning, Eagle's Nest. We are definitely in a new normal. But the good news is that many of you are doing what Ephesians 5:16 tells us to do, and that is to redeem the time. My wife got an email from somebody at church the other day, and she shared how well they're doing. She said, "Hi, Patty. We are doing well. I'm not working at the moment, and I'm home with the kids. It's been a big change, but an even bigger blessing. Love the time that I've been given with them. Our oldest is doing school online, which has been going very well, full of Zoom meetings, etc. My husband is still working his typical schedule, and so that's good." She said, "You are right," because Patty said this to her, "you are right that things are not quite the same with everything online." But she said the church has done a good job of the services online and with the worship, and so we've been enjoying church from our couch. She says Easter was full of firsts this year, including an Arnold Palmer communion drink. But overall, this situation has given our family a chance to reboot and reconnect both with each other and with the Lord. That's a great testimony of just how this family is redeeming their time. And I want to encourage you to redeem the time, redeem the new normal. We don't know how long this will be, but it's an opportunity for us to re-engage things and with one another in ways that we've not been when we've been so busy. Now, if you have a testimony of how you have redeemed your time, we'd love to hear it. Please send it to us at hello@eaglesnest.ch. That's hello@eaglesnest.ch. And give us permission to use it because we may be able to share it online over the next few weeks. Now, because everything is so up in the air and we're living a new normal, we're all still asking the question how long it's going to be before we get back to normal. How long will it be before we can engage in life the way that we used to? You're not the only ones asking the question. We're asking this as a staff as we're trying to figure out when we get to reopen our building. And so I want to say a little bit about this before I go into the message this morning. In reality, I think we're all coming to the conclusion that we're just not going to jump back into our old normal. It's going to take a little while. And so as individuals and as a church, we need to have kind of our reopening plans, our re-engaging life plans. And so we'd like to share a little bit of our thoughts there with what we're planning as a church. Now, while we can't say, and let me stress, while we can't say when we're going to reopen the facility, we can say how we're going to reopen. And let me say that again. We cannot say exactly when or what week we're going to be able to reopen. We'll let you know that as soon as possible. There's a lot of factors that control that. But we can tell you how. We are going to open softly and safely. Your safety and your well-being is our priority. And so by safe, what we mean is we are going to continue doing our online services at 9:30, even when we open our building. Because there'll be people that won't be safe to be out. So we want to make sure that you feel safe and you're still ministered to. And so we're going to maintain our services online. Secondly, when we open, we'll maintain appropriate social distancing in the building. And that's what we mean by softly. So by soft, we mean we're going to open on a limited basis, adding those parts of the ministry that are safe for all. And we will add ministries as the situation develops. Now, we'll have more details about this in the coming weeks, but we wanted to let you know that we are thinking about how we're going to reopen, and we're going to focus on a soft opening and a safe opening. And so we don't want you to stress. We want you to be relaxed, and we will provide information as it's forthcoming. But we also want to remind you that our number one concern is your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And everything we do will be with that in mind. And so when you tune in next week, we'll give you more details. Now last week, we started a series called Rupture or Repair, the Art of Conflict Resolution. We saw that the people that you love are going to bug you at times, and you're going to bug them. And so the question we're answering in this series is, what do you do when that happens? John Ortberg writes, and I mentioned he's my favorite writer, so I like the stories that he tells. And so he has another story that I wanted to use to start this morning. He says, when I think of moving from rupture or repair, I find it helpful to visualize a few simple symbols: stop, question mark, caution, and yield. He says the first symbol is a stop sign. Anytime I feel my emotions flooding and my pulse racing, it's time to stop and shift my internal gears. It works like this. If you make a fist with your hand, you'll get a picture of your brain. It's a little big for mine, but I'm going to use it anyway. Your fist and fingers represents the cerebral cortex, the thinking part of your brain that is reasonable and does math problems and learns French and does calculus. And then the thumb represents the reactive brain, the reactive part of your brain. This is the part of the brain that is instinctive and deals with emergencies. Think of the Hulk or a reality show cast. You know, they're in the reactionary part of the brain. Now, when we're calm, our cerebral cortex does most of our thinking for us. But when anger takes over, we shift into the reactive part of our brain. It's something that he calls bird brain, partly because a bird's brain has a relatively small cortex and a proportionally larger reactive brain. And it turns out that birds don't do much thinking. They're not effective at reasoning. The bird brain is more of a self-protective. It's 100% self-protective for a bird. It's fight or flight. Now, God gave humans the part of our brain that does the reactionary part, but it's smaller. It's for reacting like a bird when we're in danger. And it doesn't matter, however, how smart we are. When we get into bird brain and we shut down our cerebral cortex, we say things and do things that we wouldn't normally do. Like in the movie with Jack Nicholson, A Few Good Men. He got so mad that he began saying things that even though he knew those things would send him to prison, he said them anyway because he wanted to make Tom Cruise so miserable. Red hot anger produces what we might call the Jim Carrey effect. As I get madder and madder, I get dumber and dumber. And the only solution is to stop and switch the setting we're in so that we can get out of this bird brain and let our adrenaline subside. Now, what I'm about to say to you, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not making this up. This really happened. About 5 weeks ago, I was flossing my teeth when my brand new front teeth that I have spent thousands of dollars to get redone, dental work, they fell to the floor. I know it's just an image that's hard to get out of your mind. But here I am standing at the sink and my thousands of dollars teeth are on the floor. Now, to make matters worse, you kind of have to know the story. It's taken over 2 years. It's over $2,000, trust me. It's taken over 2 years for us to get to this place. It was supposed to take 8 months. Due to the fact that when I was younger, I had a major accident, fixing these teeth was more of an artistic work than just simple dentistry. The dentist has been wonderful. But the lab, over this time, has had a hard time getting my teeth to be just right. And so we've had to do it over and over and over again. And so this was supposed to be the last time. And so because the teeth weren't quite exact and the dentist wanted to be sure before he permanently sealed them, he put in temporary glue. And so here I am at the sink, and the reason they're on the floor is the temporary glue gave way and my teeth are sitting there on the floor. Now, when that happened, when those teeth fell, I've been a good patient. I've been a patient. This has been a long process and expensive one. But when that happened, something happened to me. I ran into the living room. I gave my wife a big hug. And I said, I'm so happy. Life is so wonderful. Let's sing. Let's dance. Let's have a joyful day. No, that's not what really happened. I got into bird brain. Man, I was hot. The proverbial straw had broken. And my patience was gone. And so I told my wife immediately, I'm going down to the dentist. They're going to glue these back in. And I'm going to give somebody a piece of my mind. My wife immediately called the dentist, who called her back. And then she called me while I was in the truck. My truck has one of those phones, no hand phones. And she calls me, tells me they can't get you until 10. So I turned the truck around, came home. Now I'm still fuming, folks. I'm still in bird brain. I'm still hot. And so I come home, and I got about an hour, to do some work. And you got to understand, to make things worse, is Monday. This is a Monday morning, and Monday mornings are like, if I don't get a good Monday, my whole week gets off. And so this has messed up my whole day. I'm still in bird brain. And so I decided I got an hour and get some work done. And I opened my laptop to this sermon, which I had begun the week before, and I had just written down that story about bird brain. Now here I am, about to create a sermon on bird brain, on being angry and not confronting when you're angry. And guess what I want to do? I want to deal with the problem while I'm angry. I'm not making this up. It was like God saying, dude, you need to live your own sermons. Get out of bird brain. So there I was upset, angry, and I was getting ready to confront the issue. And folks, here's what we want to talk about today. Before we confront a conflict, before we engage other people, we have to get out of bird brain. We've got to confront ourselves before we confront other people. Or our attempt to resolve conflict is probably going to go south on us. We've got to get out of bird brain. The Bible tells us this in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26. The Apostle Paul writes, he says, be angry and do not sin. And do not let the sun go down on your wrath, nor give place to the devil. Man, that is a very fantastic verse, especially for type A's, who I am a triple A, who live with, they say that anger is not a primary emotion, and for most people it's not. But for type A, anger is the fuel we run on, okay? And so this is one of my life verses. Be angry and sin not. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath. Now, by be angry and sin not, what he's talking about is he's talking about when you get angry, stop. Don't react. Don't respond. The word angry here is actually in the present passive imperative tense. What that means is it's a command, but it's passive, and it's saying when you're angered, when something provokes you, when something ticks you off, when your teeth fall to the floor and you get in bird brain, he's saying don't sin, because we become very vulnerable to sin. Don't react. Stop what you're doing. Think about what you're about ready to do. Now in Ephesians 4, Paul is addressing a lot of different things, but one of the things he tells us here is to be, when we are angered and when we're provoked and in bird brain, he's saying, don't react. This reminds me of the story back in the book of Genesis, chapter 4, when it talks about Cain and Abel. In chapter 4, verse 3, Genesis says, and in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the land to the Lord. And Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. In other words, his face showed that he was angered. So the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. Here's what the Lord's saying in Genesis. He's saying, be angry and sin not. He's saying, when you're angry and you get angry, Cain, the next step is sin if you're not careful. You're going to do something stupid. You're not going to think about what you're doing, and it's going to cost you. Unfortunately for Cain, he got angry and he acted on that anger. And he saw it in his face. Did you know that there are 4 universal faces throughout all societies at all time? I didn't know this until recently. There are 4 faces. In other words, when people make certain faces, these are the same faces that mean the same thing in every society at all time. The first is fear. When people get afraid, boy, you can see it on their face. You can go to any nation in the world, when somebody gets afraid and they show it on their face, you'll know it. When people get angry, you'll know it. When people are sad, you'll know it. And when they're enjoying something, you'll know it. Those are universal. And so when Cain's face changed, God could see and everybody else could see he was angry. Now the big problem wasn't that he was angry. The problem was that Cain let his anger determine his actions. His emotions began to run hot, and instead of thinking about what he was doing, he responded and he let anger run his life. He acted on his impulses, he acted on his emotions, and he did the wrong thing. And in his case, the Bible says he killed his brother. That's not a good idea, okay? It was costly for his brother, and it was costly for Cain. Now, what he was doing was acting on his impulse. Impulse, according to Daniel Goleman in the book Emotional Intelligence, is the medium of our emotions. In other words, when our emotions are stirred, we are wired to act on impulse. And what the Bible is telling us here when it says be angry or be angered, when you get angry, when you're provoked, and you get in bird brain, don't act on that. Don't follow your impulse. Before you confront somebody, stop. When we are angered, when we are provoked to anger, do you know something actually happens in our body, in our brains? When we get afraid, for instance, our blood, the blood of our body, begins to go to the large skeletal muscles, like in the legs. So it makes it easier for us to flee or to run. The fight and flight mechanism kicks in. The face begins to drain of blood. We get white. You've heard people, they get white, they get pale, because all the blood is going to where it will help us to either fight or flight. At the same time, our body freezes, if only for a moment, allowing for more of a reaction. Our circuits of our brain begin to trigger floods of emotions that put us and our body on general alert. You need to do something. That's when we're afraid. When we're provoked to anger, blood flows to our hands, making it easier to grasp a weapon or to strike at a foe. Our heart rate begins to increase. A rush of hormones, it's like adrenaline, begins to generate and pulse through our system to give us energy for vigorous action. That's when we're in bird brain. So Paul writes, be angry and sin not. In other words, when you get in bird brain, when you get angry, that's not a good time to confront other people. It's not a good time to resolve conflict. And he goes on to say, do not let the sun go down on your wrath. When we get angry, it's not a good time to, he's not telling us to confront there. He's talking about we need to deal with our emotions before we deal with other people's things that bug us. You know, Daniel Goleman continues in his book, Emotional Intelligence. He says, emotional abuse, drive-by shootings, and post-traumatic stress all entered the common lexicon or dictionary over the last decade. Think about this. As the slogan of the hour shifted from the cheery, have a nice day, to the testiness of, make my day. Folks, there's a lot of anger out there today. And what we need to learn to do when we get angered and we get in bird brain, when we get upset and we're provoked and people do things that bug us, and it's going to happen. The guy in front of us is going to cut us off in traffic. It's going to happen. People are going to say things that hurt our feelings. We're going to say things that hurt their feelings. When that happens, don't go right into conflict resolution mode. Another example this is found in 1 Samuel chapter 25. In fact, I would encourage you to read this story. This is a fantastic story. In 1 Samuel 25, David is running from Saul. Saul is the first king of Israel, and David is fleeing from him because Saul knows that he's going to be the king, and he doesn't want David to be king, so he's trying to kill him. So David is running from place to place, and as he goes from place to place, David is taking care of the people that he comes in contact with. He's protecting them from people who would rob them or harm them, and he's really doing what a good leader would do. He's serving them. Now, when he stops at a certain place, there was a man there named Nabal. And Nabal refused to help David. 1 Samuel 25:10 says, who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? Shall I take my bread and water and my meat that I have killed from my shearers and give it to men who I do not know where they are from? And so basically Nabal's just ditching David, and he's not respecting David. Now David's been on the, he's been running, he's been fighting, he's been doing all this stuff, and so David's probably pretty tired at this point. And here's David's response. Now David misses something, but David responds. He says to his men, "Every man gird on his sword." Now, I'm not real smart, but I don't think what's about to happen is good. Nabal disrespects David. Nabal says, "Who's this David? I'm not going to help him." And David gets in bird brain. David gets angry. And he says, "Okay, guys, get your swords on." It doesn't take a genius to know what's coming next. Now, the story begins to progress. And Nabal's wife, Abigail, hears how her husband responded to David, and she immediately knows trouble is coming. And so she gets her donkey, and she runs to David, and she falls before him on the ground and kneels and he says to him, "Oh, David, this is what my husband said. He's an ignorant man. In fact, his name, Nabal, means fool." And she tells David she's so sorry for what her husband did. And then David says this to her. He says, "For indeed, as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has kept me back from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, surely by morning light no males would have been left to Nabal." In other words, David says, if you hadn't shown up here, Abigail, I was going to go wipe them all out. Now, folks, that sounds more like Darth Vader than King David. Now, what happened to David is David was provoked to anger, and he got caught up in the emotion of it, and he got caught up in all the hormones and the adrenaline, and he's worn out and ticked off, and he skipped a step. Instead of confronting himself, instead of looking at what he was feeling and what he was about to do, he went and reacted to how he felt. And that misstep almost cost him his throne, because certainly if David had done that, he would have killed innocent people, and he probably would have had his throne stripped from him. So when the Bible says, "Be angry and sin not," do not let the sun go down on our wrath, it does not mean, hear me, it does not mean that you need to resolve the conflict you have with somebody before you go to bed. That's not what it means. What it means is when you're angered, you've got to deal with your anger first and foremost before you do anything else. And so this is kind of like a saying like we would use today. Paul is saying, deal with yourself and your anger or whatever emotion you're feeling before you deal with somebody else. And David, he didn't do that, and he almost got himself in serious trouble. Folks, we're all going to get in bird brain, every one of us. But when we do, we should not confront other people. That is not the time to engage somebody. I was being foolish when I got in my truck and wanted to go down and deal with the situation. I needed to calm down first, because I'm certain if I had gone there and gotten there angry, I would have said some things. Now, I probably wouldn't have been like crazy, but I probably would have said some insensitive things that I didn't mean or didn't want to say. And really, it wasn't anybody there around me's fault. My whole situation with my teeth was created by the lab. I'm literally sending the wrong teeth. And what can they, in fact, one time my dentist said, "This isn't rocket science. I don't know why they can't get this right." It was just a situation, folks. But I was in bird brain. I was angry. Now, was my anger justified? Sure. I mean, I've been dealing with this for a while. It does not that my anger was wrong, but what I was about to do with it and who I was about to express it to was incorrect. Now, I'm glad to say everything got fixed. My teeth look wonderful. Got my money's worth. But, folks, like David, I missed a step. So when you're provoked to anger, when people bug you, when the people you love, let's take this. It's not like we're just talking about people that we don't know. The people we love bug us sometimes. And if we're not careful, we react to them instead of responding. The difference between responding and reacting is just one thing. You don't miss that step in the middle. You confront yourself. And you choose your response versus just get an autopilot and just react. And so the Bible tells us, be angered, Be angry and sin not. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Then it says, do not give place to the devil. And what Paul is telling us is when we react in birdbrain, when we react in anger, we give the devil a place to put his foot in our door. We give him a place to get in and begin to mess with our lives and to bring things that are not good into our lives. According to Daniel Goleman, who I've quoted 2 times before already, and reading his book, it's a great book, Emotional Intelligence, though there's a lot of things in there philosophically that I would disagree with. His research is impeccable. And he says in there, he says, perhaps the most disturbing single piece of data in his book comes from a massive study of parents and teachers that show a worldwide trend for the present generation of children to be more troubled emotionally than the last. They're more lonely and depressed, more angry and unruly, more nervous and prone to worry, more impulsive and aggressive. Now, folks, what that means is, that means that the devil has a foot in the door. That people are more inclined to react, and we're going to have to help people deal with their reactions. And they're going to have to learn. We're going to have to teach people, and we're going to have to learn to respond by thinking through, confronting ourselves, confronting our emotions before we confront other people. This is what happened in Moses' life. This is one of the sadder stories in the Bible, though God redeems everything. Moses is the guy in the Bible that God spoke to face. Moses is the guy in the Bible who God used to lead the Israelites out of 430 years of bondage in Egypt. Moses is the guy that was given the 10 Commandments. They even made a movie about him. Charlton Heston played Moses. I mean, this is a big guy. This is the guy that talked to God face to face. And after 40 years of leading the children of Israel in the desert, he got himself in trouble one day. It tells us in the book of Numbers, chapter 20, that the people began to gripe and complain. And they complained about God, and they complained about Moses, and they were thirsty, and they were hot, and they were tired and hungry. And Moses got in birdbrain and gave place to the devil, and he missed the promised land over it. Let's read this story. It says, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, and gather the congregation. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus ye shall bring water from out of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their animals. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded, and Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together. So far, so good, before the rock. And he said to them, now this is where Moses gets in trouble. So obviously Moses is still kind of ticked. Hear now, you rebels. Must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I've given them. Wow. What happened here? Moses got provoked to anger. And when he began to live out what the Lord told him, he still hadn't resolved his anger issues. And he reacted according to his anger. And instead of doing what God told him, which was to gather the congregation and speak to the rock, he struck the rock and he challenged and chided the congregation. That was an act of anger. It was also an act of disrespect to the Lord because the Lord had given him clear instructions. Now, theologically, there's a reason for that, because under the Old Testament, the point of the Old Testament, let me explain this theologically so people don't misunderstand God. God isn't being a nitpicker here. Moses did the wrong thing. He could have very easily forgiven him, but the problem was that Moses was the leader of the Old Covenant, and in the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, you had to be perfect. And the point of the Old Testament is to show us that nobody can be perfect, that a Moses can't get us into the promised land. It took Moses' successor, Joshua, whose name means Jesus. In other words, there's an Old Testament type and shadow telling us that nobody's going to be perfect. Even God's Moses, who he spoke to face, even Moses messed up. And it took a Jesus to get the job done. Folks, you and I are going to make mistakes in this. You and I just shared with you, I almost made a mistake, and I would have felt really terrible if I went down and said to anybody, in that office, something that was not polite or not respectful. I'd have felt terrible. And sometimes, folks, our emotions get ahead of us, and we get into impulse, and we get into emotion, and we begin to react. And so we have to stop, and we have to confront ourselves. Moses didn't do that. Moses nor Aaron. And so they messed up. They acted in birdbrain, particularly Moses, and Moses didn't go into the promised land. He let the devil's foot in the door. He let bad things come into his life. And so when we're doing the art of conflict resolution, as we wrap this thing up, what I want us to see this morning is that when something happens to us and we get provoked, it's normal to get angry. Nowhere do I see in Scripture, nor in my personal experience as a pastor, have I ever seen where getting angry is a sin. Getting angry is not a sin, but getting angry can lead us to sin. It can lead us to doing the wrong thing because we get in bird brain and we stop thinking about what we're doing. So, folks, the first step in conflict resolution is not resolving the conflict. It is not confronting a person in front of you who have bugged you. The first step is to confront ourselves. It's really what Jesus taught us in Matthew 7, verses 1 through 6. Jesus said, "Judge not, lest you be judged." He said, "For what measure you measure out, you'll be measured to you again." He said, "Why do you look at the speck in someone else's eye, but not look at the log in your own?" But he says, first look at the log in your own, then you'll see clearly to deal with the speck in somebody else's. What Jesus is saying is the same thing Paul was saying. It's the same thing we saw in Genesis 4 that God was saying when he talked to Cain. Jesus is saying, the Bible is telling us, the first step to resolving a conflict is to confront what's going on in us, to deal with the emotions that we feel, whether it's anger or fear, whatever it may be, to deal with that, address that, so that we can see clearly and engage others safely. The Bible's very clear on this. Folks, if you made a mistake in these areas, we all have. Ask God for forgiveness. Ask others for forgiveness. But deal with your anger. Now, in some situations, folks, that might require some help. We might need some help before we confront somebody else. Somebody might have done something so egregious to us that we can't deal with the emotion. That might be where you need a pastor or a counselor or a friend. Somebody help you walk through that. But whatever you do, don't confront the other party until you've dealt with yourself. Or, like these stories we've seen, we're liable to make a mess. I thank God that the dentist told me on that day that I couldn't be there at 10. It gave me time to calm down. And if I was thinking wisely, that's what I would have done. I would have scheduled something to come in. Of course, it was pretty rough because when I opened my mouth, all I had was I looked like Jaws in the Bond movies. Anybody remember the Bond movies when Jaws, the big teeth, I had these metal things sticking out of my mouth. It was quite hilarious, actually. But when I looked at it, it didn't make me happy or laugh, okay? Take home for the day's lesson is everybody's going to have conflict. We saw that last week. Conflict is common, but it's curable. But we can only cure it when we start with confronting ourselves. Okay? Don't get out of bird brain. Okay? Deal with your emotion. Don't throw the weed whacker. I've heard that story before. Don't throw the weed whacker. Calm down. Listen to your wife when she tells you need to go and cool down. Listen to your husband. Listen to your friend. Listen to your pastor. I pray that this week as you go about your business, you have a great week. I'm praying for you guys. We're believing. We look forward to seeing you again. As we said earlier, we will be sharing information about our plans to reopen, a soft and safe reopening. Be safe. Keep your distance. Be encouraged. If you need help with anger issues or any issues, email us at hello@eaglesnest.ch or call us at 302-684-3149. We're here to help you. We're here to help you in any way that we can. May God bless you, and we will see you next week.
love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. And all of a sudden I'm unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory, and I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. And oh, how he loves us all. Oh, how he loves us. How he loves us. And he is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. And all of a sudden I'm unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory, and I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. And oh, how he loves us all. Oh, how he loves us. How he loves us all. Yeah, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. And we are his portion, and he is our prize, drawn to redemption by the grace in his eyes. And grace, here's an ocean we're all seeking, and heaven meets earth like a sloppy wet kiss. And my heart is violently inside of my chest, and I don't have time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way that he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Yeah, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Yeah, he loves us. Oh,
Hey, everybody. Welcome to our online service here at Eagles Nest. We hope you enjoyed today's service. If you're new to Eagles Nest and you've never tuned in with us, I'd love to hear from you personally. If you would send us an email with your feedback on how you enjoyed the online experience, we will respond to you both in email and in snail mail. All you got to do is send your email to hello@eaglesnest.ch, and we'll even mail you a new Eagles Nest t-shirt at your address. So please connect with us and let us know how you found us, and we'd love to hear from all of you. I'd like to kind of give you an announcement today and highlight our Eagles Nest Kids program. They're starting a new kids virtual meetup where you can go online at the safety and privacy of your own homes and begin playing games, enjoy a story time, have chats with other parents and other kids that are your peers, and that will kick off this Monday at 11 o'clock. There'll be the first Eagles Nest Kids meetup where you can join Sherry Yerkes and some of your favorite teachers from Sundays or Wednesday nights, and all of our Eagles Nest Kids team can kind of connect socially through that platform. If you'd like to participate, I'd like to ask you to email Sherry Yerkes at cyerkes@eaglesnest.ch for an invitation. She'll give you a private, secure invitation, and that is for the parents of our Eagles Nest kids. I also like to give you a quick reminder, parents of Eagles Nest kids, there is a separate Facebook page dedicated to Eagles Nest kids. So go check it out today if you have a Facebook account, like it, and it'll give you a plethora of resources that you can use while you are social distancing. I actually want you to consider doing something for me, church. Many of you have asked how you can help. Here's a challenge for you. I'd really like to hear from each one of you, or at least many of you, to share kind of your story and your perspective. If you'll consider sending your testimony or maybe some lessons that you've learned through this process to hello@eaglesnest.ch. It'll go just to the pastoral staff and our small staff to review. And then let us know also if we can use some of that story either privately or if we can use it online. We would love to hear your stories. One of the things that I've been reflecting on throughout this period has been Psalm 23 in the portion of the passage right at the very beginning that reminds us that God will, as sheep, will make us lie down in green pastures. And I've kind of had this theme running through my head that he's making kind of the whole world lie down right now. And whether you're a believer or whether you're not, whether you have a Christian perspective or you don't, it's causing all of us to reflect on priorities with family, priorities with work, balances or out of balances that we may or may not have had. And so I would encourage you, what are you learning? I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear some things that you're kind of going through as well. And then let us know, once again, if we can share that with the church, either anonymously or if you don't mind using your name. We would love to hear from you. Pastor Bob is continuing in our sermon series, Rupture and Repair, the Art of Conflict Resolution. I think it's very timely, and we are looking at this concept of having bird brain responses. I know he always calls me a bird brain, so it doesn't come as a surprise to me that that's the name of this sermon series. But he reminds us to be angry and sin not. So what does that look like in this environment? I'm going to meddle with you a little bit, so put your armor on. Think twice before you push send on that email or that text. Think twice before you send out that tweet or use social media as kind of a passive-aggressive attack on others. We're all kind of susceptible to bird brain if we're honest. We're all susceptible to being guilty of this to some degree. Christ calls us still to love one another. He says to love our enemies. He says to love our neighbors even more than ourselves. And so this is just a friendly reminder to all my friends out there and my enemies. Just like we have to be careful about judging someone for the personal decisions that they're making regarding this virus. We don't know enough science whether we should be wearing masks or gloves one day or not wearing them the next. And so my advice would be just make the best decision for you and your family and then allow others to do the same. It requires grace, I know. It's not easy, I know. You might bite your tongue and that might hurt a little bit, but maybe that'll help us all get out of bird brain. We love you, Eagles Nest. We're here for you. We're looking forward to giving you more information about the potential of a soft opening in the weeks or months to come. Be safe out there, and we'll talk to you soon.